Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and welcome to JAN KI BAAT. We are live right now, and it is after a significant amount of time that I am joining all of you on JAN KI BAAT. And let me first of all thank my viewers for making Janta Ka Mukadma the most watched Hindi show, and also supporting us in the election predictions that we were able to get bang on in the assembly elections in all the 5 states. But that's not the reason that I am live right now. I'm delighted that I have a reason to speak to you, and the reason is that there is a book which has gone viral and has been the talk of the town, and I have the author of that book with me. So I'm delighted that Priyam Gandhi Mody is joining me. She is the author of A Nation to Protect. It's a book on India's fight against COVID-19. And this book is available across different airports, and I would advise that you have the book. I also happened to read the book on a soft copy yesterday, and the reason was that fake news propagandist Rana Ayyub, when she was peddling a fake news through an international forum, was irked by the success and the response that Priyam Gandhi Mody's book has got, and she has she in fact went ahead to say that somebody, quote unquote, had published a shadow book which is present at all the international, all the airports across the country. And she has called this famous, the author who's writing a third book, Priyam Gandhi Mody, as quote unquote somebody. And Priyam Gandhi Mody responded to this, and her tweet has gone viral. And this is how I personally, honestly, went ahead and yesterday got a chance to read through a book. And let me tell you that it's a very exhaustive account, a factual account of dispersing all the myths and the fake propaganda. So my personal opinion is that you should read the book. But let me come to you, Priyam. Priyam, I want to ask you, so you've been directly attacked by a fake news propagandist yesterday from an international forum, and she's called you, quote unquote, somebody, and she's called your book a shadow book. What do you think propelled or urged her to write that? Is it the success of your book, or is it that because your book is very exhaustive and is busting every fake narrative that she or the other journalists are trying to project on the COVID-19 mismanagement, quote unquote, of India? Priyam.
Thank you, Mr. Bhandari. First of all, thank you for having me on your show. I really appreciate it. And now let's get to your question. So this is a combination of everything, right? It is a very exhaustive account. So for 2 years, while the pandemic was going on, the Prime Minister was certain that he doesn't want to play politics and he doesn't want to respond to any of the political attacks. So now that we feel sort of safe in the country, we feel that India has a hold on the pandemic, even though we don't know when new variants will emerge. As of today, we feel that we are in a secure situation. That's when we thought that this is a time to come out with, and answer all of that, all of those political attacks that, came in the 2 years of the pandemic. So that's one. Number two, a lot of people in the population wondered why there was no counter. They kept listening to this fake news that was being peddled for 2 straight years. And obviously they wondered that why is just one side coming out? What is the other side of the story? Everybody wants to know both sides of the story. So this is the other side of the story. So which is why this book finds a lot of takers. The story and the points in the book finds a lot of a lot of takers. Now, why she's choosing to attack me? There is a system how these guys work. First, they ignore you. They ignore you. So by mistake, also they don't mention your book or your name, so they don't want to give you that extra publicity. But then, when you've sort of found so many takers to your voice, that's when they begin to attack you because they cannot ignore you anymore because you're there everywhere. So we are at stage 2 of the process.
So, Priyam, she is the only, this fake news propagandist is the only individual in the entire world who became a polio survivor while she was speaking. So, that was another coincidence which happened. But let me go into the book. So now, see, for me, a fake news propagandist like Ayyub is of no value because she is known for misappropriating the funds of people, and she is a history cheater, according to me. But I want to go to your book, and I want to go to your your book, because there is one very interesting point, and in your book which you have mentioned, that there were, if you remember, when India was fighting COVID-19, there were members of parliament, Shashi Tharoor and others, who were who were asking, why did India approve Covaxin despite a small sample? Have you been able to even address that? Because that was a huge controversial point of view, which had different, which had a large section of media differing with the approval of Covaxin. Have you gone into it? And if you can enlighten our viewers about that,
Yes, so I'm going to give you a little more detailed answer on this, okay? Because our
please.
vaccination story is exemplary for the entire world. Now, when we were trying to get our vaccines out, when we had Serum Institute and we had Bharat Biotech, uh, there was a coordinated effort to discredit both of our vaccines, not just one vaccine, but both of our vaccines. One person would say something about, I remember either Shashi Tharoor or Mr. Anand Sharma. One of them said that why doesn't India ask the UK government for more data on Serum Institute's Covishield? Why should India have to ask the United Kingdom for any data? We had our own bridge trials, which our scientists sort of oversaw and approved. It was a very rigorous process that Serum Institute of India passed before India approved Covishield. While somebody else, the other person said, okay, the Covaxin should not have been approved because whatever, because the data is not enough. Now, let's remember where we were at that situation. We were at a point where we knew that there is a new variant that is circulating amidst us. And the scientists foresaw a very tiny possibility that maybe, just maybe, a DNA vaccine may not work. In that case, we need a backup, we need an alternative. Now, since the Covaxin trials, since Bharat Biotech trials, they were not bridge trials. Their study sample size was over 25,000 participants. And we had very, very solid data at that point in time from most of these participants that showed excellent efficacy and safety, which is why the government went ahead and gave the emergency use authorization to both of our vaccines. However, there was a very, very coordinated effort by the members of parliament, and their friendly media to discredit both of our vaccines because they want to see us in a situation where we're helpless and begging the rest of the world for vaccines.
Priyam, that's a very important point. In fact, my understanding tells me that there are a lot of individuals in the media and the political class who are waiting for India to fail, and somehow they were using and hoping for a political opportunity to emerge from the crisis. Now, coming back to a Rana Yu question, because there is a viewer, Harendra Yadav, who says that Rana Ayyub is sponsored by the anti-India forces and sponsored by the West. I think what irked her was that when she must have gone to the bookstore, because she might be taking a flight to spread her fake news propaganda abroad, because that's what she does. So when she would be on the T3 or some terminal 3, she would have seen that people are not buying the fake news books that they used to do before, and they were buying your books. And this is what had irked her, that see, there was a time, Priyam, that the left and these fake news propagandists had a monopoly over the intellectual narrative of India. Individuals like you and others have now started to come up with an alternative narrative, and have started to come with an alternative narrative and is getting acceptance, whether it is in the film, whether it is Vivek Agnihotri coming with Kashmir Files, so you giving an account of how India really succeeded in preventing a huge crisis. Do you feel that irked the fake news propagandists? Because I can tell you that after your tweet, a lot of people had messaged me that why don't you get Priyam to talk about this? What do you think? Because suddenly it cannot happen.
Yeah, no, that definitely irks. I think it has irked many, many people because you see, even in the international media, for 2 years, the way India has been attacked, the way our Prime Minister has been personally attacked by various Western media outlets, it is unprecedented. Like, you don't see it happen to anybody else. There have been leaders of nations that have had to resign due to COVID, due to their COVID management, and they've also not been attacked as much as our prime minister and our country has been attacked. So, people who are, employed because they are, that's their job description to keep on doing this. Obviously, this is going to bother them. That all of the narratives that they peddle now have a counter. Now people are going to get a counter and answer to all of those questions that they were asking.
Priyam, let me come back to the book. And, there is another point which you have mentioned in the book, which is on the migrant crisis which happened, right? Now, if you remember in the media, Sonia Gandhi, the then president of the Congress party, had written a letter to the Prime Minister saying that the Congress party will be able, will 85% of the cost of ticket of the migrants will be recovered by the party is willing, the Congress party is willing to pay the cost for the migrants in order for them to go back home. Now, you've pointed this out that 85% of the cost of the ticket was borne by the center and 15% by the states. Did you find out that the Congress party actually in the states where the Congress was ruling, did it sponsor any significant amount of tickets of the migrant crisis, or was it just a political stunt? What are the facts on it?
It was only a political stunt. So 85% was, like you said, was the money. 85% of the money was given by the center, and 15% was, to be paid by the states. Now, the rule was that the states could choose to take it from the migrants if they wanted to. Now, that's where the letter came in, where she said, "How can you take it from the migrants? We will pay." But the reality is that not a single dime, not a single paisa has come from the Congress party. They did some tamasha on those buses that they arranged, and they gave a list of those 1,000 buses, that were going to ferry the migrants from Rajasthan to Uttar Pradesh. But when Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath's government kind of went through the list of those 1,000 vehicles, the number plates of those vehicles, they found that most of them were not even buses. Some were trucks, some were junk auto rickshaws, some were something else. So it was completely distorted. It wasn't even real. There were no 1,000 buses. So they were forced to, withdraw all of those, some of those buses that they'd gotten parked over there.
So you were telling that that entire letter was a political stunt, and actually there was hardly any money that the Congress party from its coffers gave it to the migrants, right?
Not hardly, no money. There's no
No money.
money that has come from the Congress party to help the migrants go back to their villages.
These these people are great, great at political stunts. Now, let me ask you another question on your book. See, Priyam, what differentiates your book, say, from an erstwhile television journalist who has also written a book? So now I have traveled during COVID. I happened to travel across 10 states of India, and what I found was that people of India were really coming together and fighting this crisis. This entire narrative, which was created by an ex-television journalist who was there on the roads also, that there is entire स्थितियां बहुत खराब है, हाहाकार मचा हुआ है. But what I found was there was a collective will of the society to fight. So if that, what have you seen? Because that is another book which has come in the market, which has been promoted by the left ecosystem, and your book in fact is doing better. What have you seen, and how is your book differentiating with the narrative which is spread by the erstwhile television journalist?
ये आप जो जर्नलिस्ट की बात कर रहे हैं, जब वो निकली थी तो अपने वो ट्विटर वगैरह
I am
पे
talking about the Hafiz Saeed journalist.
I know. So she would put stories from picking up some samosas on the road, and food that she's picking up from here and there. And she said, I sat in my Ertiga and took off, and I traveled the length and breadth, and I witnessed the misery of the people. So to all of those people who buy that story, let me tell you that she's not the holier than thou sort of journalist that she's making herself out to be. Number one. The second point is that if you're going to travel through any country, not just India, any country, through in the middle of a wave of a global pandemic, you are going to see lives that are disturbed. You're not going to see lives that are, absolutely pre-pandemic, normal, happy-go-lucky. You are going to see disturbed lives. You are going to see disease. You are going to see death. I mean, that is the nature of a pandemic, of a once-in-a-century pandemic. So, I mean, I don't know what she expected to see, but like you said, that it's the community that came together, and there is proof, right? Like, I mean, look at what happened in the Bihar elections. So the migrants had just moved back to their villages, and Dr. Shamika Ravi of Observer Research Foundation, her team did research on the voting pattern of the Bihar elections, and they found that the villages that had the most number of migrants, incoming migrants, they voted for the NDA government. They retained the government. They voted for the NDA government. What does this say? It says that the migrants thought that they were taken care of by their government, and they would want that government to come back.
In fact, Priyam, when I also traveled during the COVID-19 pandemic and I traveled extensively, it's not that was my first very extensive non-election travel after the 400 Lok Sabha constituencies that I traveled in during elections. I realized that despite huge amount of difficulties that the people of India were facing, they still had a trust in the government and the Prime Minister that yes, they are working towards the right cause. They understood that the situation was once in a lifetime, once of a century, and that is where I had an issue, that vulturism was promoted by individuals who were seeking for a political opportunity. But on the contrary, despite the amount of issues that people face, they understood that they are in midst of a global pandemic, which is once in a century pandemic. And this is why you did not look, whether it is Bihar, whether you see Uttar Pradesh or any state election, you see the Bharatiya Janata Party coming back with a resounding mandate, because the niyat of the Prime Minister was still intact, and the people knew that the man is working towards providing solution, not just not it's providing solution to their life, and it will take time.
Yes, absolutely. Now, we forget, like, the memory is so short term that we forget what situation we were in 2 years ago, in March of 2020. We were so scared. We were scared to enter elevators. We were like spraying down vegetables and groceries that were coming home. People were living in Dharavi and other areas in Mumbai in the slum in small, 100, 150 square feet apartments. Five people were sitting at each corner, and one person was sitting in the center, trying to maintain social distancing. People were that afraid, you know. Even at that point in time, in my conversation that I've been able to have with the Prime Minister, he said that I didn't know that, if people will listen to me. So I wanted to see if people will listen to me. And once I saw the resounding response to Janta curfew, I knew that they are looking for a leader. They are looking for a leader to trust. They're looking for somebody to tell them what to do and how to save their lives. And that's when he started feeling that that he needed to communicate with the people directly. So yes, and that kind of translates in the elections, right?
Priyam, what are the three biggest fake news that you feel when you were researching for this book, right? So, what were the three
Yeah.
big narratives which you believe were completely fake, which your book, and when while you were researching for your book, you were able to completely understand and yourself realize, अरे boss, ये तो myth चल रहा था, ये तो media झूठ फैला रही थी. What are the three big myths or the fake news which you feel that the people of India should know, which was peddled in the national media at that time,
So when the
which you are trying to do
operation
through your book?
Right. So during the second wave, we had a few very challenging weeks. Okay. And that's because the Delta originated here. And when a new variant originates in a country, it was such a dangerous variant. The effect it had on the population was disastrous, right? But when it was spreading in our society, the Western media, went all out. So I remember that Washington Post did a front page story that said Indians are dying in such large numbers that they are burning bodies on the roads. Have you? I'm an Indian. I live in India. You are an Indian. You live in India. Have you seen bodies being burnt on the sidewalk? No, I have never seen it. Now, why did they pick it up? So I, dug a little deeper. Now, there was another story that somebody from the British media did, where they took one quote from the Karnataka Chief Minister's speech, where he allowed the burning, the cremation of bodies in large open grounds so as to prevent crowding in the existing crematoriums. They took that one line from his speech and they distorted that by saying that now Indians are burning bodies on the street. Now that was carried by Washington Post, obviously, changed up to suit their narrative, and it was then carried by the Straits Times in Singapore. So this is how, fake news was peddled, a certain impression was given out in the global media. There are very renowned authors who have then come and, when the Delta started spreading everywhere else in Indonesia and other neighboring countries and even in the Western world, and the kind of damage that it did in their population, that's when some people actually started to say that, a few weeks ago, the media was all over, India not being able to manage the pandemic, but now look at those countries. There's an author called Bruno Messes. He had tweeted about it at that point that the global media is being absolutely unfair. And why are they being unfair? They are being unfair because they've been fed into, this by all of these people within our system, right? Look at the stories that they did from, the bodies in the Ganga. Gargi Rawat tweeted about those bodies 3 or 4 years ago, that there are bodies floating in the Ganga. Because Jal Samadhi is a real religious practice in some of the communities that live on the cut of the river. So she posted about this pre-pandemic, that there are bodies floating in the Ganga. It is not a new phenomenon.
Priyam, how was India's fight in the first COVID-19 wave different from India's fight in the second COVID-19 wave, right? So, because you've analyzed Prime Minister's response in both the waves of the pandemic. In fact, the second was more intense in terms of there was shortage of oxygen cylinders. You had reports of certain states trying to hoard oxygen cylinders. So the situation was very tense for start. When you research for your book, how does your book provide the strategic difference between India's fight in the first COVID-19 wave and the second COVID-19 wave?
We have to see this to understand this. We also have to know that when the first wave hit us, we were protected from the wave for a significantly longer amount of time than a lot of other countries. So the wave hit the other countries first, and then it came to us. So we saw how the virus was impacting the populations in other parts of the world, and we could kind of tailor our strategy and be prepared. Okay, and we took a lot of previous steps like a total lockdown because of that. In the second wave, the dangerous Delta variant originated here. So with any new variant, you don't know how much damage it's going to do in the population until it starts spreading in the people. Then that's when you start seeing clinical symptoms, and that's when it's too late to take any preemptive measures. Then you just have to do damage control. And that's where, those 3 or 4 challenging weeks came in, because everybody at every level of government, society, NGOs got together to control the damage that variant was doing to us.
Priyam, towards the end of the interview, let me ask you, how much time did you take to write this book, and how did you compile all the facts for it? What was the process of writing this book? How did you compile all the facts, and how much time did you take?
I took about 8 months to write it, and I wanted to, speak with everybody who made our policies during both waves, actually all 3 waves of COVID that have hit us, and from a top-down approach, because I wanted to see how policy was framed and then how it was trickling down to, the last man on the ground, and that's why I spoke with everybody, who was responsible for advising the prime minister, who was responsible for ensuring that the policies sort of percolate down below, and also folks from the private industry. So I spoke to, our vaccine manufacturers, I spoke to doctors who were attending to patients in the big cities. So there is a whole, I wanted to get like a full rounded sort of a perspective, and that's what you see in the book. That's how we have all the data that we have.
Priyam, if I want you to rate India's response to COVID-19 on a scale of 1 to 10, how much will you rate the Prime Minister's effort out of 10, having researched and spoken to all stakeholders across and spent 8 months, doing an objective and a dispassionate analysis of India's fight against COVID-19? and let me tell you before you speak, let me tell the viewers as I speak, there is lockdown in certain cities of China still. So, so if you compare our response, and if you remember, Priyam, there was all this liberal hua of the New Zealand model of how India should learn from New Zealand, which is not even 1/10 the size of India. And after, when we look back in retrospect, we could do 10 times better than a New Zealand with 100 times more the population and geographical area. So that entire liberal model, or that entire liberal narrative was also busted. Just to mention, because it just struck my mind. Yeah, how much will you rate the Prime Minister's effort?
So I mean, I am a very tiny piece of the puzzle to rate the prime minister, but I want to say this, that when you look at other major world leaders, they faced, maybe smaller challenges than we did because they had, better evolved healthcare infrastructure. We've inherited decades of weak infrastructure. Now it's getting a little bit better, but with what we had and the kind of work that the prime minister put in, like day in and day out, and crunching every extra minute that he could, I don't think that any human being could have done a better job. In fact, I worry sometimes that if it wasn't him and it was somebody else who were trying to be prime ministerial candidates, if they were in office during a pandemic, during when the pandemic struck us, we would have seen tragedy and disaster. We would have actually seen the bodies piling that they wanted to see, that some of these were, propagandists wanted to see. Then we would have seen that situation.
Well, in fact, let me tell you that great leaders always get great challenges, and Prime Minister Narendra Modi has himself proven time and again. It's not one-off incident. He's proven time and again that whenever challenges are unprecedented, his response has also been unprecedented. It's a dispassionate way of looking at it, and when you look in the global perspective, we as a country really survived this. We as a country really fought back, and we as a country, have gone forward rather than going backward. If you look at across in the global perspective with the challenges which you rightly pointed. Are you willing to debate with the fake news propagandist Rana Ayyub in any of the forums, because she continues to peddle fake news? I don't know how can these people be called journalists also. They should be called as fake news peddlers. But anyway, are you ready to debate with her one-on-one any day?
Yeah, yeah. In fact, some of those I remember during the second wave, Karan Thapar wrote a piece in the Wire that said, "I have 20 questions to ask the government." My book answers all of those 20 questions. If he still has additional questions, he should ask me on a show. So I'll tell him, I'll answer all of those questions for him. So anybody who has any such questions, please ask me. I'm very happy to talk it out on live television.
Definitely, Priyam, and through you, I am also throwing a challenge. Priyam has challenged all those individuals who spread fake news. Come and debate with her. Come and prove every fact. It's a fact versus fact fight. And Priyam is confident because she's really done an objective and exhaustive analysis. And thank you so much, Priyam, for joining me on this exclusive conversation on Jan Ki Baat. Hope to speak to you soon and have you also on my show. Take care, stay healthy, stay fit, and continue to fight against these fake news propagandists. Pleasure to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you.